Hi, Jody and Jessa. Mike Kayla here. Today I will be talking to you all about communication accommodation theory, also known as CAT theory, which was initially coined by Howard Gills in 1971 at the University of California. Communication accommodation theory attempts to explain how humans, when interacting with other humans, try to modify their speech, behavior, actions, and gestures to accommodate the person that they're interacting with. Why do we do this? Gauss argues that we do this for four reasons. Two of them are convergence, which is to gain the listener's approval and to communicate efficiently. And then the last two are divergent tactics, in which we try to assert our dominance and maintain a positive social identity. How? Gauss argues that we do it through two communication accommodation aspects. And the first is convergence, which is we alter our actions, speech patterns, and social norms and gestures to accommodate them and come together, as the root word in convergence is con, which means to come together and maintain the relationship, whereas divergence is when we alter our speaking patterns, social norms, gestures, and things of that nature to diverge and to separate, ultimately deteriorating the relationship. Three practical usages that I thought of was in secondary baby talk, which is something that we briefly touched on with Dr. Baldwin, in which we, as young people, when talking with elders, tend to speak slower and use smaller words, and this is an attempt to converge, but it could potentially be over convergence, just simply because even though we are attempting to come together, it may result in negative effects, which is different than divergence. And speaking of, the last example that I will use for practical usage is an example of divergence, in which English speakers tend to assert their dominance over a non-English speaking person in a conversation. So if you have an English speaker and a Spanish speaker, the English speaker will use bigger words to try and justify their intellect over the Spanish speaker in a conversation, ultimately making the Spanish speaker feel inadequate and less than, and resulting in a deterioration of the relationship. Real life example, Mean Girls. In a section in Mean Girls, the movie, Regina George comes to the cafeteria ready to eat on a Monday, and she's in sweatpants. The Mean Girls do not wear sweatpants on Mondays, and they tear her up for it. They ultimately end up deteriorating the relationship and ousting Regina George. That's a clear example of communication accommodation theory and the divergent aspect. Lastly, the three research studies that I found include a speech accommodation strategy in life insurance, in which the researchers talked about the convergent and divergent tactics that were used by the representative of the life insurance company and the person who should have been receiving the life insurance. And they stated that both parties engaged in a multitude of convergent and divergent strategies. One that I thought was really interesting was the divergent strategy on the part of the person who should be receiving the life insurance. And the tactic there was to basically state that the representative was implying that their life was ending and they didn't appreciate that. The next research study that I found was one on hope in relationships. And this is something that I really like, so I'll read it, that they wrote. It says, one of the most important findings in the study of romantic relationships is that relationship health and longevity depend on the partner's ability to break divergent chains of negative reciprocity in conflict situations through constructive communication. So basically, these researchers found that when trying to maintain relationships, hope was a very good way of doing that. It was a very nice convergent strategy. And those who didn't have hope and those who engaged in divergent strategies did not maintain their relationships. Lastly, an examination of cat theory on majority-minority languages in Finland. This is really interesting because the two languages in Finland are Finnish and Swedish, Finnish being the majority. And these researchers found, oddly enough, that Finland, the majority, converged, whereas the Swedish diverged. I found that to be a little odd because why would the minority be so reluctant to uh, come together and maybe promote their own language and their own usage of their language? So it's just really interesting to me that they tend to diverge as these researchers found. I hope you all enjoyed my little spiel on communication accommodation theory, and I'll see you all later tonight. Bye bye.